Good evening and welcome to the first edition of the Leaders Interview with Michael Ryan. Thank you for making the time this evening. I know it's 8 o'clock in the evening on a Tuesday and it's unusual. I'm sure you haven't been invited to listen to a session like this in the evening time after you come home from work, but we thought we'd be different. We thought, we'd give you an opportunity to get home from work, have the dinner, put the kids to bed, settle down and relax on the sofa. Get yourself a glass of wine or a cup of coffee or whatever you like. And then I'm going to give you a nice, interesting conversation to listen to. So first of all, for all of you who don't know me, even though you're watching this on my LinkedIn profile, my name is Michael Ryan. By way of introduction, I am the founder and managing partner of the boutique consultancy Finance Transformation UK. As part of that, we have actually developed a magazine offering called Finance Transformation Magazine, which you may have come across because we've been posting it on LinkedIn for the last 18 months. I'll just give you a quick example. You can see that there on screen. They're the British Olympic champions. And here we have Mandy Hickson, who's the first female fighter pilot in the RAF. And the reason I just took a second in order to show you the magazine was that's the caliber of individual that goes on the cover. So you can imagine how this is actually like a kid in a sweet shop for me. I get to meet somebody who's flown for the RAF. I get to meet somebody who's got an Olympic champion's gold medal. I mean, this is like great stuff. And I meet all these people, and we put about 10 of them on average once a quarter into the magazine. We produce a print version, as you can see, and we release the rest of it online. And one of the big things I've been trying to do, because I actually do have, after 25 years in finance, I have an awful lot of friends and an awful lot of connections. Due to the fact that I do the conference speaking, I get to meet some great people along the way. And I meet people who have fascinating stories to tell. And we don't always get to put them in print because there's the time pressure of doing your job and all the other distractions that you've got and all your family responsibilities and everything else. So I decided we'd actually come up with an interview series. Now, no great rocket science in that. Other people have done them. But I want to start this and evolve it as we go along. Get it into a TV studio. Let's set the bar high. We're starting from here today. I'm actually in a hotel in West Dublin, about 2 miles from my own home. So, nice to be doing this today. I've invited on a person who works for Hayes, whom I first met 6 years ago through Jamie Radford, who's the CEO of the AP Association. And I was running the first Accounts Payable Association conference for Jamie that he held back in 2017. And I was host and keynote for the day. And the very first lady who spoke in the morning was Karen Young. And Karen Young is a director at Hayes for the last 20 odd years or so. And I'm going to let Karen introduce herself now at this stage and just take over from me for just a second. Go ahead, Karen, tell the viewers a little bit about yourself.
Sure, thank you, Michael, and thanks for inviting me. I'm no RAF pilot nor Olympic gold medalist, so just set the bar right now. I am a director at Hayes. For those that don't know us, we're a professional recruitment services business around the globe, and I am, in my day job, responsible for our accountancy and finance recruitment business at Hayes in the UK and Ireland, and that's over 300 consultants that specialise in accountancy and finance, and I'm the strategic lead for that business, and an expert in finance recruitment over many years, too many to count, and I won't give you the exact number, that's over 20. But more latterly, and this is hopefully what we're going to spend some time on today, responsible for developing and articulating and leading our social and environmental purpose at Hayes in the UK and Ireland, and it's certainly been a great journey over the last 12 to 18 months or so.
Okay, thanks for that. And I think it's worth mentioning to the viewers, we've known each other through the conference circuit, and I know one or two of your other directors at Hayes, the likes of Tim Hall and so on, based in the Midlands, because I run finance transformation programs for a living. And I have actually found Hayes extremely helpful in staffing my project teams and indeed staffing the finance functions that I'm responsible for. And that actually led to me approaching Karen earlier this year and saying to her, why is it that Hayes have so many directors who've been there for 20 odd years or so? I think if I was actually to stop the show at the moment and lean into the audience and go, what's your typical impression of recruitment life cycles? They'd probably go 2 years, and then they jump to another consultancy or another recruitment firm, 2 years, then they set up on themselves, then 2 years from there. And you guys have been working there for 20 odd years. And you're all top of your game. I mean, you staff my teams at the drop of a hat brilliantly. So I challenged Karen to get Alistair Cox, who's the CEO of Hayes, to write for the magazine. And what he wrote about was, I think, one of the best things that any senior leader could write about. He actually told us in 2 pages what the DNA of Hayes was. But now that we actually have one of those self-same directors on the show this evening, what do you think is the DNA of Hayes before we get into all the other stuff that I actually invited you on for?
Uh, Quite simply, it's people. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we are a recruitment business, so people are at the heart of it. We we help people to achieve their career goals. We help organizations to recruit their talent. But if you haven't got the right people doing that within Hayes as an organization, and that culture, I mean, I'll admit it. I joined Hayes in 1996, and we were already part of the PLC at that point. And the business has changed massively over that time, from the size of it, the scale of it,
Mm-hmm.
how many people are in it, but how we sort of run the business and the culture, and the always, over a quarter of a century, the people that work here having the passion to do the right thing by their customers and by their
Mm-hmm.
colleagues is I think what's just made it a brilliant place to work for me. Um, and the other thing I would say is, people ask me to describe Hayes, and I say I can do it in 2 words. We're entrepreneurial corporate, that things are always changing. We're transforming, and innovating and pushing the boundaries. So often over the years, a lot of candidates, people looking for new roles, have said to me, well, how can you advise me, Karen? You've been at Hayes for 20, 21, 22 years. But
Yeah.
I've done so many different roles, and that career enablement has been a big part for me personally.
Okay. Okay. So the reason that I actually invited you on, and I suppose why did I want to actually have this show in the first place? Because I thought that an awful lot of people had stories to tell that were worth telling, that was beyond the day job. We're not actually going to talk this evening about recruitment. For anybody who tuned in and has sat there with the coffee and the biscuits, we're not talking about recruitment. We're going to talk about something far more interesting, which I actually think will inspire quite an awful lot of you to follow in Karen's footsteps. So myself and Karen were doing yet another one of Jamie Radford's gigs back in April when he was doing the Accounts Payable Summit in Birmingham. And we rocked out of the session afterwards, and we went straight across the road, and both of us I was going for the plane and Karen was going for a train. And he says, right, we'll have a quick drink. The quick drink turned into, I think, maybe possibly longer than a podcast is supposed to run. And we discussed everything under the sun. But the one thing that became clear to me about Karen was that Karen was actually passionate about something. And when you flick through LinkedIn on a regular basis, you'll see that Karen engages actually in quite a degree of charity work. She's been organising sleep outs and so on and so forth. And I was intrigued by this. So, you flick through something on LinkedIn, you don't go into the detail of it. And actually, one of the reasons why we're going to have this chat today is we're going to pause and actually just hear from the horse's mouth, as it were. Where's the passion coming from? What are you focusing on? What are you driving in Hayes on the corporate social responsibility side?
Sure. I suppose it's good to start, where it all began, and a certain element of that is my personal life, if I'm honest. In terms of where the passion comes from, I've been involved in charity work from being a teenager. I think the first time I can remember fundraising was the Great North Bike Ride in Newcastle,
Okay.
with my 14-year-old friend Olivia at the time, and cycling to raise money for Macmillan Cancer at the time. I lost my mother at an early age to cancer, so cancer
Okay.
charities have
Sorry.
always been very close to my heart. So that happened by the time I was 14. And when I applied for Hayes in the summer of 1996,
Mm-hmm.
I haven't got a copy of my application form because it's not online, I would imagine. But I know that I would have had a strong, compelling message about being sporty and competitive. I was a keen
Mm-hmm.
runner. Probably three weeks or so after I started with Hayes, one of the board directors who'd been involved with my recruitment at the time, we were a smaller organisation then, arrived in the office that I joined, and said, well, you got you got the role partly because you're sporty and competitive, and that desire to kind of keep going and the tenacity. And he said, so here's the London Marathon application form. You can run it for the Hayes corporate charity, which happened to be Macmillan at the time. And I said yes, of course, and I duly filled it in. And in 1997, during my first 12 months at Hayes, I ran the marathon, and at the time raised, I don't know, about £3,500 for the company. But that
Very good.
began the merge of sort of my personal life into professional, and then it was obviously just something that carried on. So I suppose I became a little bit known for being someone that did a lot of charitable works. Now, where that merges with professional is an approach from the board, the Hayes UK and Ireland board, in the first
Okay.
instance to head up our UK charity partnership with End Youth Homelessness, who remain our charity partner, and then ultimately to a task to really lead and develop all of our good works at Hayes, many of which have been going on for longer than my 26 years. We've always done good works, but maybe not been as good at pulling it together and having a strategy and a focus and a real kind of purpose for it, and empowering everyone in the organisation to feel part of it rather than just a few people like me prepared to put the trainers on and run the London Marathon, because charity
Yeah.
work can take many different guises. Um, and um, and 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 that's what the board asked me to do. And ultimately, the outcome of that was, after some initial work last year, I was in a board presentation. We had 6 key strategic priorities as part of an initial 3-year strategic plan at Hayes. And by the end of that board meeting, the board voted that what I was doing needed to become a 7th key strategic priority. So the
Right.
work that we're going to talk a bit about more today is known as KSP7 at Hayes.
Okay.
So that's the
Okay.
backdrop to it, really. So a little bit of a message
Right.
around being your authentic self at work, and maybe some of
Yeah.
the direction it can take you.
Yeah, yeah. And to be honest, normally when you come across people in life, you kind of come across them, and I always find there's some background thing in common that you might never get to.
Mm.
And I know we had a conversation, oh God, probably the Christmas before last, and you actually started for Hayes in the Romford office, wasn't it?
I did. Yes, I did.
Yes, yes. And the very first, I came to England in 1996, showing my own age now at this stage. And the first contracts I got were actually got for me by the Romford office. My first exposure, and I've come full circle. Here I am at the grand old age of 51, and I'm still contracting. Only these days they call it the far sexier term of I'm now an interim.
Yes.
Whereas at the time it was like, would you go do a job for £16 an hour? And I'm like, no, give me 16.50 for it because I'm worth it. And the girls from
Absolutely.
Hayes going, no, you're not. Yeah,
Absolutely worth it.
the other thing I noticed, there's good and bad things to LinkedIn if you like, because you can see loads of things. But I'd almost swear at some stage that apart from starting this off by being challenged to run the London Marathon, I'd almost swear at some stage you've been swimming one of those lakes.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, that came about because we were really pre-COVID pandemic, for a lot of years. Every year we would run a charity challenge of a physical nature for 50, 60 opportunity for 50, 60 plus employees in the UK and Ireland to sign up and do a charity challenge.
Okay.
And what was the first one I did? Beat the Moon, it was called, which was in the Lake District a long, long time ago, and many others around the UK. And we just had this ambition. Could we pull that together? Could we bring 50, 60 people post COVID pandemic together in the same physical location, and raise some
Yeah.
great money for end youth homelessness? And a colleague of mine, Dan Rogers, who's a project director at Hayes now, he was on Beat the Moon with me all those years
Okay.
ago in the Lake District when we were raising money. Might have been for the Brain Tumor Society at the time. And so we came together and we put a small steerco together along with our internal comms team, and shaped this challenge. Now, I kind of knew that if I was kind of being the person on the ground, I couldn't do the challenge as well. It was going to be really tough to do that. So I said, well, a couple of weeks before we convene in the Lake District, and I pick people up from train stations and all sorts and play taxi for the weekend, I'll do something myself. So yeah, I set the challenge of swimming Ullswater end to end, which is seven and a
Yeah.
half miles of open water, and
Now,
got the
now,
job
now
done.
well done. You're talking to an Irishman who's been to the Lake District once. I presume that's in the Lake District, is
It
it?
is. It is.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's up your
Yeah.
neck of the woods. And
It is.
which one of the Hayes offices are you in today? You must be at
I'm
the
in the
Northwest one,
Lancaster office,
the
so just on the
Lancaster
edge of
office.
the South Lakes, just about.
Right. Okay. My abiding memory of going to the Lake District in I think it was around February time is that it's bloody freezing.
It's
So
quite
I
warm
don't know
today.
how you.
It's quite warm
You
today.
think I was actually thinking of the water. I don't know how you swam 7.5. I'd
Do you
look
know,
at it and I'd go, no.
but trust me, for the last 2 miles of it, I didn't know how I was going to keep going. But as many people watching this will have done charity challenges before, when you've got
Yeah.
sponsorship and kind friends, colleagues, family that have put money on your head, it's what keeps you going over the line. The difference I found with the swim, just if people are interested, is London marathons. I did have another go post my 97 attempt because I wasn't very happy with my time, but I really struggled at the end of that 97 marathon, and I was
Yeah.
really struggling. And it was a guy also running in a Macmillan Cancer shirt who I started chatting to because I think he was like, "Come on, you can keep going." I can't. You can't. You can. Anyway, he'd had cancer. He'd recovered from it. He was running for Macmillan, and to thank them for their support. And I thought, crikey, if you've done that, then me at the age I was in full health, I thought that. And we crossed the line and we put our arms up, and these days there would be photos that I'd have been emailed the
Yes.
photo. We'd
You'd have
probably have
been
had a
all over social
selfie.
media.
That was it. We went our different ways, got our medals down different channels, but
Yeah.
he kept me going. In a swim with your head in the water, you're in your own personal misery, trust me, and you're just going, this, can I keep going? Can I keep going? It's only when you get out at the other end and you sit on the
Yeah.
bank just broken, and someone says, that was pretty brutal, wasn't it? And you then can have the chat that you'd have if you were doing
Yeah.
marathons on your feet. So yeah.
But that's one of the, to be honest, because I've always loved sport. I've always been involved in sport. And actually, most of the clubs I played for are literally within 2 miles of where I'm currently sitting.
Mm.
And one of the things you touched upon there when it came to the swim, obviously, you're facing the challenge. You're actually doing it alone. I think I was having this conversation with another swimmer recently as well. Like, if you're halfway or two-thirds of the way across a lake, what are you going to do? Put your hand up and say, look, I've had enough. You can't really, can you? And when
Well,
you've got that
you can
drive,
in an
yeah,
organi you can do it, because there'll always be support boats in something like that if you're
yeah.
in an organized swim, and
But
it does
what I'm
happen.
getting at, is somebody like yourself, and probably like myself to an extent as well. You're not going to let yourself stop.
Mm.
You're going to keep plowing on to the end. You've set yourself the challenge. You're going to pull it on. But
Yeah.
what I was driving at was, this actually is a good link into what you're doing with young homeless people. Because at the end of the day, at their stage in life, they could just put the hand up and go, please send me the recovery boat. But you're
Yeah.
doing an awful lot to help them. Tell us
Yeah.
what you're doing there.
Well, where it came sort of where it's come from is, partly with my charity lead hat on. We do a lot of fundraising for our charity partners. We've raised a lot of money. The three-piece challenge in the Lake District in the summer, we raised £42,000 that day. It's a lot of money. It helps a lot of people. And over the last 12 months or so, that money has gone to help 190 young people into training pathways or employment. So, it's
Right.
influencing and changing the courses of lives. And I've always been slightly uncomfortable in my fairly new hat of charity partnership, that typically corporates will engage on a charity partnership for maybe a 2 or 3 or 4 year term, but it's always got a term to it. And you do as much as you can, and you run around and you raise lots of money and you organize these challenges. And then to a certain extent, you kind of like, partnerships up, it's been great. You long list and you short list for a new charity partner. In Hayes, we enable our employees then to vote on the final three, and a partner is picked, and off you go again.
Right.
And myself and Simon Winfield, our UK and Ireland managing director, and a few other people were kind of like, doesn't feel quite right. Is that partnership? Is that legacy? Is that sustainability? And how can we do things differently? So we started some conversations with Nick Connolly, who's the managing director at End Youth Homelessness, and his leadership team, and threw a few things around, well, hey, we are a recruitment organization. We're talking to employers who need talent every hour, day, week of
Yeah.
our lives.
Yeah.
And you don't have to, if you've sort of not been reading the media, not to be aware of nearly 1.3 million unfilled job vacancies in the UK at the moment, and not enough talent to fill them.
Mm.
And we just felt, rather than, yes, we'll always continue to fundraise, but how could we do things differently and actually physically help, if you like, to
Mm.
help get young people into jobs. And the part of the program at End Youth Homelessness that we sponsor, they have an Independent Futures program, and Hayes, we sponsor the employability element of it. So
Okay.
certainly in terms of any charity that's facing into homelessness would say, well, getting a job is absolutely fundamental to getting into
Yeah.
a home of your own ultimately in the future and building that independent future. And that's the part that we're having to play. So we are now in a strategic collaboration with EYH, as I'll shorten it to for this purpose, End Youth Homelessness, to build that, to help to give that kind of helping hand to the young people, and to work with employers that want to do more in this space, want to help with youth engagement and, if you like, underutilized talent. So
Yeah.
if anyone is listening and thinking, well, crikey, we'd love to get involved with that, then here I am, and do reach out to us. It's not a plug for that. We said it wasn't sales and we said it wasn't recruitment, but hopefully that just maybe intrigues you a little bit to think, yes, actually,
Well,
I'd like to know more.
I think we've spoken for 25 minutes so far, so